May 8, 1945, 22:43 hours. Near the Elbe River. Steam drift from a cold, silent locomotive. Frost bites the edges of twisted rails. The night is still, but the metal hums with the memory of movement. Helmets lie scattered on wooden benches inside the carriage. A Mauser leans against a crate stenciled Kraftstoff, Wehrmacht. Outside, a red signal lamp swings in the wind, unheeded. Distant craters mark where bombs fell. The rails vanish into darkness. A young engine driver steps from the cab. His uniform is soiled with soot. He listens. Nothing answers. No whistles. No orders. Just the wind and the fading echo of a war that has ended. But whose machines have not yet learned to stop? The train does not move. And in the silence, you can almost hear the last command. Hold position. May 8, 1945, 22:43 hours. Outside Magdeburg, on a shattered rail spur near the Elbe River. The train does not move. Steam hangs low in the cold night air, drifting like breath from a dying animal. The locomotive's firebox glows faintly, then dims. Somewhere down the line, metal ticks as it cools, sharp, lonely sounds in the darkness. The smell is oil, wet coal, scorched iron. No whistles, no orders, just silence pressing in from the fields. Inside the lead carriage, helmets lie on wooden benches. A Mauser rifle leans against a crate stenciled Kraftstoff. Wehrmacht. The war has ended, but the train has not been told how to stop existing. Outside, a red signal lamp swings gently in the wind. No one comes to lower it. Hours earlier, word of Germany's unconditional surrender rippled to the Reich in fragments. Radio static, shouted rumors. Scraps of paper carried by runners who no longer knew where to run. Trains like this one were still scattered across Europe. Troop transports frozen on sidings. Fuel trains abandoned in forests. Armored flat cars loaded with Panzer IVs that would never fire again. This train had been ordered east at dawn. It never left. You can almost hear the last command echoing in the steel. Hold position. The rails stretch ahead into darkness, twisted in places by Allied bombing. Craters gape where tracks once ran clean and straight. The timetable is meaningless now. The Reichsbahn's carefully synchronized machine, once the logistical spine of German conquest, has snapped. A young engine driver climbs down from the cab. His uniform is filthy, the eagle on his breast dulled by soot. He stares down the line, listening. Nothing answers. No approaching engines. No signals. No Luftwaffe overhead. Just the wind and the distant rumble of artillery that has already stopped firing. For years, these trains had moved like arteries of steel, divisions to the front, wounded to the rear, coal to factories, ammunition to waiting guns. Now they're stranded organs, cut off from command, from purpose. Across Germany, thousands of military trains sit exactly like this one. Some are packed tight with refugees, women clutching children, old men gripping suitcases, eyes hollow from weeks of flight. Others carry darker cargo. Forced laborers, prisoners, the evidence of crimes hastily concealed in boxcars sealed from inside. A few are nothing but machines, locomotives and wagons stacked with spare parts, artillery barrels, bridge sections, crates of bolts and bearings meant to keep a collapsing war alive for just a little longer. All of it stops tonight. The driver lights a cigarette with shaking hands. The match flares, briefly illuminating his face. Exhausted, stunned, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. He does not know who owns this train now. He does not know if the next footsteps on the ballast will belong to American infantry, Red Army soldiers, or desperate civilians stripping anything of value. He only knows this. The Reichsbahn's military empire has died without a final order. Somewhere to the west, Allied planners are already counting these trains, not as weapons, but as assets prized as reparations. In the east, Soviet rail officers are preparing lists of locomotives to be seized and hauled away across borders that are still bleeding into existence. And here, on this quiet spur near Magdeburg, history holds its breath. Because what happens next to this train, whether it is stripped, seized, scrapped, or reborn, will happen to thousands more across a defeated continent. The war is over. The reckoning for Germany's military railways is just beginning. June 1945, 6:10 hours. Leipzig freight yards. Soviet zone of occupation. Boots crunch on cinders. Red Army railway troops move with practice efficiency. Clipboards in hand, pistols at their belts. Steam engines line the yard nose to tail, blackened giants scarred by shrapnel, their number plates still bearing Reichsbahn insignia. Chalk marks appear on boilers and tenders. Cyrillic letters. Inventory numbers. Ownership rewritten in white strokes. This is no battlefield. It is a harvest. Months of bombing have shattered bridges and marshalling yards across the Soviet Union. Thousands of locomotives lie destroyed from Kursk to the Vistula. Now, Germany's rail empire, built for conquest, will pay the price. Reparations are not abstract promises. They are measured in tons of steel, wheel diameters, axle loads. And trains are perfect payment. A Soviet major points. A clerk notes. Another engine is claimed. You stand at the edge of the yard and watch as German railwaymen, many still in faded uniforms, are ordered to repair their own locomotives for departure east. Some comply silently. Others hesitate, knowing these engines will never return. A few wipe grease from brass fittings one last time. Small gestures of pride in machines they kept running through years of bombing and shortages. The first train pulls out just after sunrise. It moves slowly, underloaded, escorted by armed guards riding the footplates. The rails sing faintly as steel rolls eastward, toward Poland, toward Belarus, toward the Soviet interior. By summer's end, entire rail yards will be stripped bare, signals dismantled, workshops emptied, turntables frozen in place like abandoned clock faces. In the western zones, the seizure takes a different form. American and British officers walk through depots with notebooks and cameras. They are less interested in stripping Germany bare than in stabilizing what remains. Coal must move. Food must reach cities. Refugees, millions of them, must be transported or they will starve where they stand. Usable locomotives are quietly reassigned. A former troop train becomes a refugee convoy overnight. Flat cars that once carried Panthers now haul rubble from bombed-out city centers. Military markings are painted over, replaced with chalk destinations and improvised schedules. France arrives with claims of its own. Entire train sets, especially modern electric and diesel locomotives, are earmarked as compensation for occupation and destruction. Some are driven west under their own power. Crews swapping languages at border crossings where paperwork barely exists yet. But not every train is worth taking. In forests, along branch lines, and tunnels collapsed by air raids, hundreds of military trains are simply left where they stopped. Boilers cracked by frost. Axles bent by overloading. Wagons scorched from strafing runs. No fuel. No crews. No purpose. Grass grows between sleepers. Children climb rusting flat cars, unaware they once carried guns pointed at the world. Scrap dealers arrive with torches years later, cutting steel into manageable pieces, erasing serial numbers along with memory. Some trains vanish without records, looted, cannibalized, dragged away in sections under cover of confusion. In the East, entire consists disappear into the vast Soviet rail network, repainted, renumbered, their origins buried under layers of soot and bureaucracy. By 1947, Germany's once mighty military rail system no longer exists as a single entity. It has been divided, consumed, and scattered across continents. Yet a question lingers in the wreckage. What happens when weapons of war are forced to become tools of peace, or are simply forgotten? Because for a few of these trains, the story does not end in seizure or scrap. For a handful, it takes an unexpected turn. October 1952. 5:32 hours. West Berlin, Anhalter Bahnhof freight approach. A rebuilt locomotive exhales steam into the dawn. Its steel is freshly painted, its bearings newly machined. But beneath the cosmetic order lies an older skeleton. This engine once hauled ammunition trains through occupied Poland. Its frame still carries stress scars from an Allied strafing run in 1944. No plaque mentions that history. No one asks. The train moves anyway. Across divided Germany, the survivors of the military rail system live double lives. In the West, absorbed into the new Deutsche Bundesbahn. Locomotives are renumbered, standardized, and pushed back into service. Coal shortages, the Marshall Plan, and sheer necessity leave little room for sentiment. If it rolls, it works. Passenger coaches once reserved for officers now carry factory laborers. Freight wagons built for armored divisions haul timber, bricks, and grain. The war hides the details. Reinforced floors, overbuilt couplings, scarred steel that refuses to break. In the East, under Deutsche Reichsbahn, the story is harsher. Resources are thin. Repairs are improvised. Some engines work until they quite literally tear themselves apart. Others are stripped to keep a few running. Soviet-built locomotives mix with German designs, creating a patchwork fleet held together by discipline and desperation. And then there are the forgotten ones. In overgrown sidings, military trains sit untouched for years. Their paperwork lost. Their value unclear. They become landmarks. The rusted train near the woods, the wagons by the old bridge. Locals avoid them, sensing something heavy clinging to the steel. When scrappers finally arrive in the late 1950s, they find more than rust. Sealed boxcars still hold rotted uniforms. Crates of spare parts stamped with eagles and dates that never came. In rare cases, human remains, victims of transport chaos, never recovered, never recorded. The war refusing to stay buried. By the time Germany's railways are modernized, electrified, and streamlined, the military trains of the Reich have almost vanished from sight. Museums preserve a few locomotives, stripped of context, polished into artifacts. Most are gone entirely, melted down into rebar, pipes, car frames. But their legacy endures. The post-war rail network, East and West, was built on their bones. Timetables, yard layouts, even engineering standards trace back to wartime necessity. Germany's economic recovery rides on rails laid for invasion. Every morning commuter, every coal shipment, every industrial revival train follows paths carved by machines designed for war. And sometimes in quiet depots, old railwaymen swear they can still hear it. The echo of orders shouted over steam, the weight of trains that carried armies, and then carried the consequences. Steel remembers, rails remember, and long after the Reich vanished, its trains kept moving, hauling not conquest, but the burden of history itself.